time, yeah, making a difference, one cup at a time, tea time. So be sure to grab your tea, grab a seat, and tune in to Miss Liz. Tea time, making a difference, one cup at a time, tea time, yeah. Tea time.
Well, welcome to tea time. You know what that means. It's storytelling time and words. And that's the way we spill tea on Miss Liz's platform and table and house. So before we get started, we're going to get you guys all over to Miss Liz's YouTube channel and ring that little doorbell. You'll find Miss Liz on YouTube under Miss Liz's Tea Times. Give that little bell a ring and you can watch these tea times at any time. Or you can join these live streams and bring your questions, comments, and support and all that good stuff as well. Today, I have the incredible James Bao in the house, and we're going to be talking about his books and his tea. And his tea is Timely, Excitement, and Ariel. So we're going to bring a different type of tea. So before we get started, we're going to do disclaimer, bio, all that good stuff. And then I'm going to get James in here, and we're going to spill and have some fun this afternoon for tea time. And then Miss Liz has a few announcements at the end of the show that I'm going to make. Disclaimer for Miss Liz's Tea Time live show. Miss Liz, myself, is going live using StreamYard. Before leaving a comment, please grant StreamYard permission to see your name at StreamYard.com. Please be advised that the content brought forward for any Tea Time show hosted by myself, Miss Liz, is always brought forth in good faith. However, it may bring forth dialogues and opinions that are not representative of my platform. The facts and information are perceived to be accurate at the giving time of airing. All Tea Time guests and audience participants are responsible for using their good judgment and taking any action that may relate to the discussion. The content brought forward may include discussions for some where they may be emotionally at risk. It's significant to know that this show is engaging in discussion forums only to offer and inspire awareness and connection and is not providing therapeutical advice. If you have any questions about the disclaimer or the panelist discussion, you may freely contact me, Miss Liz, through my email at bookingmissliz@gmail.com. Moving forward, should you choose to voluntarily participate in today's show in any aspect, I myself, Miss Liz, welcomes you. And should you decide that the show is not made for you, I respect those wishes and will see your later show at a later date and time. Again, all regular tea times are done on the Thursday, 3 p.m. and 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you see a tea time on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or even a Friday, it's a surprise tea time, rescheduled tea time, or a special tea time. So today we have a special tea time. So a little bit about my guest. We have James Bao. James Bao writes science fiction and fantasy for both kids and adults. He's been a fan of science fiction since his family introduced him to the Doctor Who on TV Ontario in 1978. And his mother read his classic science 5 and fantasy from such authors as Clifford Seamock and J.R.R. Tolkien. I'll get him to say it. James won the 2017 Prix Aurora Award for the Best Young Author Novel in Canada for Icarus Down. By day, James is a communication officer for a charitable land trust protecting lands from development in Waterloo Region and the Wellington County. He also loves trains and steer cars. He lives in Kitchener, Ontario with his 2 kids and his spouse, fellow writer, partner in crime, Aaron Bao. You can find more on him online at jamesbao.ca, and I'll have that across the screen during our live conversation. So let me get James in here and let's spill some tea together.
Hi there. Hi there.
Welcome, James.
Hi.
So for any words I couldn't pronounce, could you pronounce them for me, please?
Well, my last name is actually pronounced Bo, not Bao, but a lot of people get that wrong.
I'm so sorry about that.
And I like trains and streetcars, like what they have in Toronto. And I believe it's J.R.R. Tolkien, although I couldn't tell you for sure.
Well, I really apologize for saying your last name wrong.
That's okay.
So you're like the bow and arrow.
Yeah, like bow and arrow, take a bow.
So James, I'm going to take you way back. We talked a little bit about you growing up in your bio here. So who was James as a little guy and who is James now?
Well, honestly, I don't, I see the same, see the world just sort of the same eyes as I was, when I'm 10. It's as big and as terrifying and as exciting now as it was when I was back then. I was living in downtown Toronto. and didn't need to learn how to drive until I was 23 because of the city really worked well on foot and with public transit. And I was living with my parents, of course, and my mother read to me before bedtime really quite late, up until I was like in my about 12 or so. It's one thing my wife Erin and I have resurrected. She has me read to her before we head to bed, before we go to bed, and that helps her sleep. But that way it also makes sure that we keep reading and we keep on seeing, getting new books in. And so back then, was as I am now, quite the nerd. I quite liked watching Doctor Who and Star Trek, and my mother introduced me to a whole bunch of science fiction novels from the 50s and the 70s, like as you mentioned, Clifford Seamack, and she read to me The Lord of the Rings with J.R.R. Tolkien, and that really probably just set something off. My mother was also a writer, as and my parents are both librarians, so they had a love of books that they transferred onto me. Yeah,
So, James, did you find having somebody read to you really open up your imagination as a child?
I certainly didn't close it or anything like that. I don't think I don't think it hurt, and it gave me I think it gave me an appreciation for books. Another thing that helped was my high school, Harvard Collegiate in Toronto at the time. This is the late '80s. Did something which was seen as quite innovative. They set aside 20 minutes of the school day after homeroom for what they called spur or silent personal uninterrupted reading. And just any book that you brought in was fair game, and just people sat and read. And I don't know. I don't think we do that anymore, and I think that's I think that's been a big loss. What that does is we learning about a book the way we tend to go through books in like your English courses. Although I mean that these are important classes where we learn about Shakespeare and whatever else is on the curriculum. But the way we get in depth with the books, the way we always have to write reports about them, I think can sometimes uh, wear people away from reading, wear them out. But just say, this is your time, bring yourself your own book, whatever you want. That I think really um, helps build a love for reading on its own rather than, it means that reading is not a chore or reading is not homework. Reading is just something that you do.
I wonder if they still do book reports in school today.
Well, as far as I know, I mean, my kids went through the early high school, and I mean, I don't think much has changed in terms of, you read a book, the whole class sort of reads a book chapter by chapter. They go through the themes and the meanings and the metaphors and everything, and it's valuable stuff. But it is still, it can, if you're not careful, sort of like take the passion or take the just the whole imagination out of the book in some ways. I think English teachers, although they taught these books, were always trying to find ways to make sure that didn't happen, and so I don't think that has changed. But I do feel that I haven't seen that just 20 minutes of bring your book and read. Um, I haven't seen that these days, unfortunately.
Yeah. So, what books would you bring in when you were asked to bring a book into school?
Well, I mean, I was enjoying science fiction at the time, and I was enjoying all sorts of like it tended to be heavy on the action side.
Oh,
Um, you know, that's what a stereotypical teenage boy type thing. Those are the types of things you read. I went through the Foundation series around then. Um, I also got into a bit of the spy novels like 39 Steps, I recall, and stuff like that. Um, I didn't really do my mother's science fiction collection till until much later, but I did find things that were sort of tend to be more action oriented or genre rather than literary.
So, James, how old were you when you started writing?
Well, I was in high school. I was a Doctor Who fan since 1978 when my family happened to watch an episode on TV Ontario. And I joined fandom when I was 12. And one of the things they have in fandom is fan fiction, where fans write stories set in the universe of the story of the series or story they love. And I got into it then. Um, a lot of and As I went through high school, I graduated to editing and putting together fan fiction magazines. Um, the whole art of photocopying and getting, doing our own print run with the Surlux binder, with those ring things. That's kind of, uh, there's so much more fan fiction around now, and not all of it, a lot of it's so fantastic. But I mean, I think the whole uh, physical copy and the production process is something that is sort of that I miss. But yeah, I was passionate about that hobby, but I thought of it as a hobby. In my academic work, I was knuckling down and toward working on geography and urban planning and going into university for that degree to look for a real job. And unfortunately, I graduated with an urban planning degree from the University of Waterloo in May 1995,
Oh,
just right between. Not sure how many of your viewers will remember and recognize these names: Bob Ray and Mike Harris, the leaders of the government of Ontario.
kind of
Bob
gives our
Ray,
ages away, James.
yeah, yeah, it does. But yeah, Bob Ray. I mean, I say I make a joke of this, but honestly, I think Bob Ray did the best he could. But he was still governing during a serious recession that wiped out all the private practices that would typically hire a young graduate. And then and then he lost to Mike Harris, who was this conservative who then did a big cost cutting thing with the government. So suddenly I was competing for government jobs with government entry level jobs with senior managers who had 10 years of experience or more. So I sort of come out of university with this degree and this optimism, and nobody's hiring. And I took temp jobs. At least I could type. I fell into the tech sector before and which paid well, but was a soul sucking type of job. I did more of these low level administrative jobs, paying the bills and scrabbling up what I could. But what I realized was that throughout university, throughout high school, throughout even these jobs that I was working on, the things that I loved the most was when I was writing, when I was creating something. And so when my in my trying to figure out the date here, I guess I would have been very late 20s, early 30s. I decided I'm going to try and write something that's in my own universe. I've done all this fan fiction. Let's try to do something that's in my own universe. And I put together a series. I put together what became three middle grade young adult fantasy novels and submitted them and finally got them produced. And it became The Unwritten Girl, which was released in 2006, and the sequels, Fathom 5 and The Young City. So yeah, I officially became a writer when I was 34 back in 2006, but honestly, I've been a writer since I was in high school. I just hadn't realized it yet.
You're also a freelance journalist as well, right, James?
Yeah, well, that came up after when I committed to writing and getting my fiction published. I wanted to do other things related to writing, so I just pushed ahead on uh, submitting articles. I managed to get a few contacts in the publishing industry to do these nonfiction work for hire educational books for kids, for school libraries type of thing, and those are churned out quite a whole bunch a year. They give you a topic. They say you need to give us an outline. It's 32 pages. You have a month to write it. Whereas in fiction, between accepting of a novel and the publication is 2 years. This was a lot quicker timeline, but that was exciting in its own right, and I felt and I was privileged to be able to do that. And when I tried some business writing, I answered a call from my community newsletter, a newspaper, and did a weekly column there for about 10 years, and that pushed me into the being a communications officer for organizations like the Canadian Water Network and currently the Rare Charitable Research Reserve. So I am privileged to be able to say that I work as a writer, as a communications officer, and I'm proud of the work that I'm doing for Rare, but fiction is still my first love. Unfortunately, it still doesn't pay the bills.
Right. Writing doesn't pay bills, guys.
It does not. I mean, unless you work really hard or get really lucky, or you're doing things like freelance journalism, and or you've managed to maybe become a communications officer for a particular organization that you believe in. Yeah.
So, James, tell us a little bit about that organization that you work for.
The Rare Charitable Research Reserve is a charitable land trust. Uh, we protect a land from development and maintain it in as natural a state as possible for the benefit of the surrounding community. We currently protect 1,500 acres of environmentally significant lands across nearly a dozen properties in Waterloo Region and Wellington County. And part of that is not only just we don't believe in just in the traditional method of conservation of like taking a land, fencing it off, and keeping people out and saying it's protected now. If nothing else, if people don't understand the benefits this land has to them, then the political will to protect these lands in the future won't be around. So we
Yeah.
try to integrate these protected areas with to the community, with the surrounding communities. We try to get them to understand what these lands mean to them in terms of clean air, clean water, the ability to walk on trails in some of these lands for their physical and mental health, and that sort of thing. So I'm the communications officer, so I do things like produce a biannual newsletter, their biweekly e-news, and press releases, and so there's a lot of creativity that goes into that, and that's so there's a so it's a lot to like about that job for sure.
And that area is gorgeous. I was like I mentioned before we went live. I was just there a couple of weeks ago, and there's so much out there, especially
Yeah.
around the Peterborough area and all of that. Like
Oh yeah.
beautiful lakes and parks and scenery that you want to see and check out. So, have
Yeah.
you been in Kitchener your whole life?
No, I was born in Toronto and raised in downtown Toronto until my last year at high school, and then my parents moved with me as I went to university, the University of Waterloo. So I was in Toronto for first 20 years of my life, and then moved up to Kitchener Waterloo and have been there ever since. Kitchener Waterloo is about an hour's drive away from Toronto, so um, I do sort of feel like I may be outside of Toronto, but I'm still very much a part of Toronto. Um, it's like a relationship a grandparent has with their grandchild. You get to go into the city, you get to love it and enjoy it, and as soon as it starts to smell, you leave.
Yep, you leave right away. Right? Beat him up on sugar and then send him home.
Yes, exactly.
So, James, can you tell us a little bit about what the urban planner it does? Because we have a guest here that would like to know more about it.
Sorry, say that again.
The field of urban planner.
Or
What?
urban planning. Urban planning is the design of cities and, well, basically the design of where people live.
Okay.
Uh, it ranges from anything from, zoning, what goes where do we put the houses, where do we put the commercial centers, where do we put the industries, where do the roads go, that sort of thing. It's city building is one way of putting it. It's also about how to make spaces livable for people. So
So,
that's what.
so James, do you work with the city of Waterloo?
Well, I mean, I came up with a degree in urban planning. The
Okay.
official degree is environmental science, but I didn't end up being in the field. I just so I'm this person who has these skills, among them a degree in urban planning that I guess informs my writing when I write about people in cities and stuff. But I have not been able to sort of apply it to a professional job. Although, as a communications officer for a charitable land trust in Waterloo Region, there is a lot of contact that we have with the various cities around us, and so I know the vocabulary of what we have to talk about with these people, and so I guess in some ways that does help. There is some connection there, so um, yeah,
Oh, that's cool.
yeah.
Well, now let's get into your tea. The tea that you gave me was timing, excitement, and aerial. And before we went live, you told me was stretching odd for aerial. So let's get into this. Get into that stretching odd with the
Well,
timely, excitement, and aerial.
well, honestly, I was a bit put on the spot for it's like what give me words for these letters, and I just sort of put down what came up first and timely, and what was my E?
Excitement.
Excitement. Timely and excitement just sort of popped up, and then it was like I struggled with what the A was, and when I say I stretched, it was like I wasn't sure what to do, so I stretched and thought about it and came up with the word aerial, although it's more based on Kate Bush's album from way back called Ariel.
Oh,
Um, yeah, but so that's what I meant when I said it was stretching. There wasn't there wasn't a lot of deep thought about what those words were, except that I wanted to try and bring in something that was different, I guess, other than say and.
well, it kind of resonates with what you do too, as well, right? Everything
Yeah,
takes
maybe.
time and the excitement, and then the aerial, like working with the zones and
Yep.
plans and all of that, right?
Yeah. Aerial, I guess I also think it's like the big antenna. You're up really high and you're looking down on everything. You're looking down on this. You're high and kind of vulnerable because it's like it's not like you have an observation pod around you. You're sort of hanging
You're
on
way
to
up
these
there.
hanging on to these like this spindly metal scaffold. And it's like if you fall off, it's a long way down. But on the
So
same
that's the excitement.
That's the excitement. At the same time, you're looking down on a tremendous view, and I guess, yeah, I could probably uh, BS a sort of whole idea about that's very much like writing. You're looking down on this view that you're privy to, your characters aren't, and hopefully, when this is also a view that you're creating, and hopefully you do a good job on it.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Is the twisted tea. I love these twisted teas that my guests give me, and I like putting you guys on the spot. And I like that you guys really think about the words and that because they
Yeah,
resonate with you, right? I can't say, okay, well, James, this is your tea, like timely excitement and Ariel, because I'm just meeting you, right? So I can't. I'm just gonna
yeah,
guess, right?
yeah, pretty
Um,
much.
but our teas all live within us, and words come to us that might not make sense to other people. So people might say, well, why is his tea that, why did he give those words, right? So that's why I always try to dig deep into the tea and spill
Yeah,
it and make sense of the tea, right?
yeah, yeah,
so, so James, let's get into your books because Mickey sent me the Sun Runner. What's that
yeah.
book about?
Well, the Sunrunners is the start of what I'm uh, calling a sequence of books that we're calling the Silent Earth sequence. And the backstory behind it is that the Earth has not never does not solve climate change. It just pushes the consequences back long enough that it's able to establish colonies throughout the inner solar system. And and it goes on for a little while before the consequences of climate change catch up to Earth, and through catastrophe, instability, war, the Earth goes silent, and all shuttle service that the Earth used to provide stops, and so the colonies of the inner solar system are left on their own in various stages of self-sufficiency, or in Mercury's case, this is the Sunrunners, not self-sufficient at all. So they have a really big problem because they were importing 2/3 of their food from Earth.
Oh,
So it's a story about how they deal with that, and it takes place over sort of two sort of plot lines that take place 50 years apart. One at the start of the Silence, where a young officer of one of the latitude towns on Mercury, because these cities are always moving on rails across the surface of Mercury to uh, keep ahead of the dawn, so they stay on the dark side of the planet and avoid the intense direct sunlight. So Adelaide is a lieutenant on one of these latitude towns, and she has to make some hard choices as that eventually, as she deals with this their colony's starvation and breakdown of order, and this eventually leads her to wearing a a wrought iron crown as a queen, or officially stadtholder. It's a Dutch word meaning steward, uh, in charge of one of these towns. And 50 years later, uh, her granddaughter, Frida, is a crown princess who would really much rather be an engineer. She's like next in line to the throne, and her dreams are shattered when an accident costs her most of her one arm, and a good deal of her other hand. And also it turns her life completely upside down when her mother dies in that accident. So she's a young and vulnerable queen, and butting heads with her grandmother Adelaide, who is dowager and regent. And just when the Earth wakes up and makes contact for the first time in 50 years. So um, Frida would like to, wants to, is eager to end Mercury's isolation, but Adelaide's suspicious as heck, and worries about all the other latitude towns' willingness to accept everything the Earth has to offer without question. So that's a brief summary of what the story is about, but it's about a story of intergenerational trauma, about learning about your own privilege, and overcoming tremendous obstacles, and the dangerous necessity of hope.
oh wow. So
Yeah,
it's got a lot in it.
yeah. Well, the story's been 10 years in the making. Um, and a lot of things when I write, I tend to sort of throw things at the wall and see what sticks, and then I sort of scrape away sweep aside what
It's like
doesn't
cooking
stick.
spaghetti, right? You throw
Yeah,
the spaghetti on the wall. If it sticks, it's cooked.
yeah, and then I have to sort of like clean things up a bit, and so there was a lot in there. I mean, the story started really with the image of a crown princess of a alien world, of this very technological town, but somebody who had all this privilege and and royalty, wanting to do a job that was a lot more down to earth. And I expanded from that, asking questions like, okay, who is this woman? Why is she there? Why does she have this conflict of desires? Why? And it just built from that in terms of, put the story on Mercury with the Earth not being there. Why wasn't the Earth there? Why was it silent? And initially, it was like, why, when the Earth comes out of the silence, why is initially Frida's mother so dead set against renewing contact with Earth? And Aaron, my partner in crime and fellow writer, mentioned it's like, well, if her mother is so antagonistic, maybe she was there at the start of the silence. Of course, I mean, it couldn't be her. That's not enough time.
She was in the
So
shadows watching.
yeah, so that becomes so that role became her grandmother, Adelaide, and then I explored Adelaide's story. It's like, why was she? What happened to her when the Earth went silent? And that's how the story built, um, just from that one image to a planet that was a whole colony that had gone through hell for 50 years and was not sure uh, how to respond now that the Earth comes back. And then going even further from that, I have to ask myself, why did the Earth fall silent? And if there are colonies on Mercury, I mean, Mercury would not be the first place we would go. What's happening on Venus? What's happening on Mars? What's happening on the asteroid belt? And just from that one image, a whole universe grew, and part of that's covered in the companion anthology Tales from the Silence.
So, James, how did you get the title for the book?
The Sunrunners is just taken from the whole concept of these towns that are constantly moving, staying ahead from the sun. They're running from the sun, and that's I mean that's really it. I will say the idea of that came from Kim Stanley Robinson and his book 2312. He pictured this city on Mercury called Terminator, and it was the brilliance of his design is that it's on rails, but that is stretched across all the way around Mercury, and the sun. It's the heat of the sun. It causes the rails to expand, which pushes the city further and keeps it in the dark. It's a fail-safe concept. It's an act of physics. Um, I ran with that idea and made the cities mobile so that they could go faster than than this, so they can move ahead into the far dark, so to speak. And but I made sure to show my work by calling those rails that these cities were running on Robinson rails.
Okay.
And I acknowledged it further by having somebody say, named for Kim Stanley Robinson, the renowned 21st century philosopher who believed, yada, yada, yada. So I figured that way he wouldn't complain.
So, James, your books are for the young adults, right? Correct?
I Young adults are definitely welcome to read them, and I do love reading young adult literature. I feel there's a great clarity in the story, and the coming of age tale, which is in a lot of young adult fiction, is just such a powerful plot. And so I come back to that again and again. So I guess I write what I want to read, and I like reading young adult, and so my books come out as young adult. But I'm not like firmly saying I'm writing a young adult book. Uh, I'm writing a book. It happens to fit well with the young adult audience, but also it's if anybody else wants to come in and read, anybody older, because there's plenty of adults who like to read young adult fiction, they're welcome to it too.
So, James, you have another book here that I was sent, The Tales from the Silence. Is that the book before The Sunrunners or after?
It's a companion anthology.
Okay.
When I when I wrote the Sunrunners is I guess the first book. You can read them in any order, although the Tales from the Silence would have a couple of spoilers for the Sunrunners. But as part of the whole expanding of the universe thing that I mentioned before, there's a companion novel which, should it be printed, might come out in 2026, which features Venus and Mars. So I, I didn't stop writing with the Sunrunners. I burst on ahead with the Cloud Riders, and I had a couple of short stories or short story ideas with as well. And I didn't want to go through the whole individual process of submitting these things through magazines alongside the Sunrunners. So I worked out an interesting arrangement with the publisher Shadowpaw Press, which is this Canadian publisher that's doing a great job with bringing these books out. And I said, if you will take the risk on the Sunrunners and publish it traditionally, he also has an independent publishing wing. Then I will put together an anthology and put it out that way. And so I approached a number of authors in my community, science fiction, Canadian science fiction, young adult, even some of my fans and old friends in Doctor Who fandom, and invited them to play in my sandbox. And so they came up with their own sort of short stories set on other parts of the Silent Earth universe. We have stories on the asteroid belt, on Mars, on Venus, and on the moon, and a couple of stories on Mercury as well within this 50-year period. And that became known as Tales from the Silence. So, and we were able to release both books at the same time earlier in November.
If I remember right, I'm trying to remember Doctor Who. That was the guy with the phone booth, right?
Yep. I mean, we just celebrated the 61st anniversary. It now is about over 15 different actors who have played the lead role. um, that I think that is a good series to enjoy and write fan fiction for, especially if you want to practice the craft of writing. Because really, at the core, although it dresses itself up as science fiction, what Doctor Who really is a story about a wizard with a magical cabinet that can take him anywhere in the universe at
That's
any
right. Yeah,
time.
and I believe it used to play at 6 p.m. where I where I
Oh
lived.
yeah, that would have been PBS.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, TV Ontario, it was like Thursdays and Saturdays at 7:30, and and the music, of course. Um, it's suddenly become a lot cooler to watch it now that it's come back. So, now that it's come back and it's on Disney Plus. Um, but yeah, it's a very easy show to write fan fiction for because it's like you have a portable hero that can be dropped into any story that you choose to compose, and so you can take any sort of you can take the hero off the shelf, you can take various villains off the shelf, or you can just write your own story but the hero is available for you to sort of set things rolling, and it allows you to just practice. I mean, fan fiction is fun in its own right, but it's also a great vehicle for practicing and improving your craft as a writer.
So, James, with your work, do you time travel in your books?
Well, I guess. Um, I mean, I'm visiting the future, well, a future with the Sunrunners and Tales from the Silence. Um, Icarus Down is my other science fiction book that's also set in the future. My fantasy stuff tends to be contemporary, uh, sort of characters from this day and age encountering weird and strange stuff. So, um, and yeah, I get deeply involved in these characters' worlds as I build up their stories, and I enjoy seeing how they do. So I guess yeah, I'm a visitor. I'm the camera over their shoulder. I'm privy to their thoughts, and so that's a kind of time travel, I guess.
Would you like to time travel, James?
Uh, well, I guess I want to maybe to sort of see if there's anything to sort of like look forward to after 4 years from now. um, I've thought about. Sorry, I have thought about like be nice to go back and see what things were like in my or when in my childhood. But honestly, I mean, we may say that things are worse today than they were yesterday. Things weren't as good as they were, but the honest truth is, uh, our happy childhoods came with a whole bunch of other troubles that people were fighting against. Things weren't good for, you know, our Native First Nations people with the residential schools. Civil rights were under threat and had to be fought for. So, and you don't have to go back very far for people who are, you know, who are demon for people who really had trouble sort of standing up in society for who they were. So I believe David Suzuki was the one who said it's like there are no real good old days. The best day is today because today is the day that you have control over tomorrow.
Yeah.
So yeah, if I were to have access to a time machine, it would be to visit, not to move out.
Right? Just and pop in
Yeah,
and out. Kind
for
of
sure.
like Back to the Future, right?
Yeah,
Just pop in and
I'd be
out.
a tourist. I would not be an immigrant or a refugee from the. I would not be a refugee to the past.
So, James, do you have any books in progress that are coming out in the future that you'd like to talk about?
Well, the next release from Shadowpaw Press is a book that I released in 2019 under with Roots Publications. Yeah, that's being reprinted. It was called The Night Girl. It's a new adult fantasy novel set in Toronto about a young woman who comes to the big city looking for employment and finds it as a administrative assistant for a jobs agency that finds jobs for goblins and trolls. You could say her boss is a real troll, but actually he's a goblin and it's not that bad. That sort of thing. Um, and I am working on. I have a draft, but I'm working on revising it for of the Cloud Riders, which is a companion novel in the Silent Earth sequence, set on Venus and Mars, a little bit after the Earth falls silent. So it's like an interplanetary country mouse, city mouse, where we see these compare and contrast these two worlds through a pair of characters that end up following each other between the two of them, the two planets.
So, James, which planet do you prefer, Venus or Mars?
Well, you'd have to read the novel to see why for sure, but I think I definitely would prefer Venus because it's a cooperative society where people are trying their best to do their best for everybody, whereas Mars is very much set up by tech bros and is uh, run by the families who are operating as a type of mafia. So I think Venus has a kinder society, although the two are trading with each other. And also, it comes up. Uh, Venus has Earth's gravity roughly, whereas Mars is one third of that gravity, and that presents some challenges. If Venus were to recolonize the Earth, for instance, they'd be able to stand up. Martians would not. So, yeah, Venus is the colony I think people would want to live on if they couldn't live on Earth, assuming, of course, they could set up a decent colony for it. You'd be on Uber Zeppelins flying about 50 kilometers above the surface. And so, I mean, that's just so cool.
So, James, how do you build your characters for your books?
Well, a lot of it I do sort of on the fly by the seat of my pants. I have an image of who they are initially. I think they come into focus enough that I'm able to start writing and exploring who they are. For example, Frida, I had the starting point of a princess that wants to be an engineer. Um, and yeah, and then I explore. I ask the questions of why is she the way she is, and then why are the people around her, how do the people around her, affected by her or affecting her, and you start out. I think you start out with very basic characters that you embellish as you go along, based on the answers to the questions that you ask. Um, Like we started out with the antagonistic relationship between Frida and her grandmother. Why was she so antagonistic? Why was she so cynical about the Earth coming back? Well, what was she like when the Earth went silent? So, um, yeah, it's. I mean, it's a very organic process for me. Don't have, I don't make charts or note cards um, too much. So much as I just write and see what feels right. Although I do end up calling up websites of various names, baby name makers for. I need a sort of a Brazilian name or a Dutch name, that sort of thing, um, and like that. But in terms of who these people grow to be, it's a organic process. They grow into their stories.
So, are you drawn to the Dutch language?
It just felt right. It just happened that the main characters of the Sunrunners were Dutch. The explanation is the various latitude towns. There's 17 latitude towns and two polar statics. They were set up by the various space agencies on Earth. The Messenger was set up by the European Space Agency, so there's a lot of like people there who are Northern European or from the Netherlands. Their main sort of rival, so to speak, set up by the Brazilian Space Agency. So they, when they're talking, they use a Portuguese turn of phrase, that sort of thing. But there is immigration between these various cities over the past few years, just not too much. So there is that sort of character. That's just the way it turned out. It just felt right in this particular case, to have all these people with sort of Germanic or Dutch um, names suggesting that sort of background. I mean, with the other books, it's a completely different take. It's a completely different take, suggesting a completely different backstory or history. Because names do tell you a lot about who these people are and where they've come from and what their history is. So if you take time to sort of be fairly consistent about um, where these names come from, then you'll end up, without getting into too much detail, showing that there is this history to these people, that they've come from this line or come from have this history, and I think it's a very I find it to be a very effective way of providing that detail without bogging us down in details.
Well, I think it's really cool when you look up babies' names because they always tell you what they represent, right? Or what they
Yeah.
stand for. Have you ever taken two names and put them together?
Um, well, I did play a bit with the names in some of the stories set on future Earth in Tales from the Silence, and I did that to sort of these are these are actual names like Rebecca, except we spelling it Rebeka. So the the language is simplifies it. It's changing. It's somewhat simplifying, um, and it just shows where. Or Kyle is spelled Kile, not Kyle, that sort of thing. Or a person at the who's at this who's living in Toronto in the future refers to the CN Tower spelled SEE-EN. So it that sort of thing's just again, it's just a history without me having to bash the reader over the head with a history lesson.
History time.
Yeah,
James is in the house.
I mean, the trope is called "I've suffered for my art. Now it's your turn." This is why Victor Hugo stops Les Miserables with a whole long section about, or is it Phantom of the Opera, about the Paris sewer system or something. It's like, yeah, I studied all this. Now it's yours.
Pass it along.
Yeah,
I've done the work. Now read
exactly.
it. So, James, I want to get into the trains and steer cars. You mentioned a little bit at the
Streetcars.
streetcars. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, yeah, I think most kids like trains, and I guess I just haven't grown up. But at the same time, streetcars, like public transportation, is important for me because well, everybody remembers their first car. It
Yeah.
represents freedom, the ability to go anywhere, and a real sort of moving away from childhood to adulthood. But for me, my first car was a streetcar because I used it to get on myself and just go to school or explore most of my city. And since that city was Toronto, it meant I could go lots of places.
Yeah.
To be a similar thing I heard about was this mother who gave her kid a Metro card on the New York subway system and just sort of tested him to see how well he could get home on his own. And he did great. He did fine. And so basically said, okay, this is yours. The city's yours. So he's going to remember that Metro card was his first car.
Yeah.
That's why I think that's one reason why I like trains so much. And my Aaron and my kids have been teasing me that it was only a matter of time before I would write a story about trains in space. Um, although the mobile cities, I think they're so big that they don't really qualify as trains. Although I mean, I guess they have a point. Um, there is a train in Tales from the Silence. One of the stories is called After the Apocalypse in Moosonee. Moosonee is a real town on James Bay, and its only connection to the southern part of the province is the Ontario Northland Railway.
Yep.
And in this story, the earth collapses, and so this community loses contact with the people in the south, and they make do. And then 26 years later, a train comes up from the south, and there are soldiers on board. And this man in an overcoat hops out and says, like, "I'm with the government. We're here to help." And and so folks are like, "Okay, 26 years. Do we really want this?" That's sort of, I guess that was a bit more my story with a train in it.
My first train ride was actually to Moosonee.
Oh yeah,
It's
nice.
odd that you mentioned that. It's small world, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that was my first train ride. I think I was like 9 years old.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still. I mean, the Polar Bear Express is still around, and the Northliner will be coming back. Fingers crossed in 2026. So I will be back on that train when it comes out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It brings back a lot of memories because I'm a northern girl. I'm originally from Hearst, Ontario. So,
nice.
yeah, so a lot of memories. You're bringing lots of memories and good memories back. So that's
Okay.
good. Uh, so, James, I asked you to give me one word to describe yourself, and you gave me the word quiet.
Hmm.
Why that word quiet?
Well, I mean, I think that's just the way I was. I mean, you enjoy reading, you enjoy sort of sitting around watching TV. You're not into sports. You're not into sort of the forefront of high school society. So you're not one of the popular kids. You're one of the quiet ones in the back, and I think that's really sort of defined me. Um, Through my life. I've been sort of too busy writing to really be active and take part. And I mean, that's a mixed blessing. It's and but yeah, I'd say yeah, it's a mixed blessing because I mean, you're not as active as you should be. Yeah, you can be. It's I was a focus for being teased. That's another reason why I was quiet. Not to attract attention, but still was able to have a decent childhood playing with my own thoughts and writing my own worlds, and I was able to, and this is where I am now. So not sure where people would have expected me to be. I'm not sure where I expected myself to be when I was in high school, but I'm here now, and I'm pleased where I am.
So, what message would you like to give out to the young writers that are out there that would like to write in the fields that you write in?
The best advice if you want to be a writer is you got to write. Um, Fan fiction is a great way to get involved. It's all about practice. Every word you write makes you a better writer. So you have to practice. You have to. Journaling is a great way of doing it, but fan fiction, especially if the fandom is active, is a great way to build an audience of people who appreciate the work you do and also offer constructive criticism, which is key to helping you improve as a writer. So start writing. Find something that you're passionate about and write to that. Um, and hopefully that will snowball. You'll find your people. You'll find friends, and you'll find people who will give you the creative, constructive criticism. And then then you can go further and join things like writing groups and stuff like that. It's a long process. I've heard Ido von Belkom say that every writer, there's three things that help a writer be published: talent, persistence, and luck. And you need two. So, I mean, if you have, I mean, some people have talent, or you can build talent, but that takes persistence.
Yeah.
And even if you have talent, you're going to need either luck or persistence in order to get your writing out to the audience that wants to read it. And and that's that all comes down to just don't give up. Just keep doing it. You're here because hopefully you're enjoying what you're doing and what you're doing. And if you're enjoying what you're doing has value. So just keep doing it.
Awesome. So, James, if anybody would like to reach out to you, how could they reach out to you?
Well, check out my website at jamesbow.ca. My email is there. I'm on Blue Sky. Search for James Bow. Um, I'm on Mastodon and on Facebook, and I'm happy to answer questions and yeah, and chat. So join me and follow me, and I'll and on these venues, and yeah, that'll be great.
Awesome. Well, I had a pleasure sitting down and having tea with you and getting to know you a little bit better, James. I want to
Thank
thank
you.
the viewers and listeners out there as well for tuning in. A special shout out to Mickey Mickelson from Creative Edge for giving me James today, and a lot of other incredible authors throughout the year. The message that Miss Liz wants to give everybody is just keep spilling your tea, keep being true to yourself, and we will make a difference one cup of tea at a time. The announcement that Miss Liz has for you is December 19th. Check out for the farewell thank you reunion show of Miss Liz. Miss Liz is closing her shop up after the reunion show after 5 long years. Miss Liz will be working towards other things, but you can check out all of these incredible tea times for life. They will be on Miss Liz's YouTube channel. Check that out. Subscribe to that channel. Share these tea times if they resonate with you, or connect with somebody that you might know, or somebody that's looking for just that pickup. Share that tea time with them, because these tea times, that's what they're there for. They're there to teach educational awareness through a different type of tea with Miss Liz. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. We do have 10 shows left. We do have 2 cancellations that Miss Liz is sorry that she cannot reschedule because of closing shop up. So tonight's tea time has been canceled, and tomorrow afternoon's tea time has been canceled. So you can check out those guests as well with the press release, or check out their websites. Miss Liz still wants to get you to check those guys out as well, even though they haven't been on tea time. And again, thank you to everybody who has tuned into Miss Liz this year and for the last 5 years. Without you guys, I could not do this. So again, thank you, James. Thank you, Mickey. And we will see everybody tomorrow at 7 p.m. with Tong Ji, another
Yes.
guest from Mickey Mickelson. So stay tuned for that, and we will talk about her book as well tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. Until then, I wish you guys all the best. Stay tuned, and we'll just keep spilling tea until the tea is no more.
Sounds great.